If you monitor the raw traffic of any digital storefront, the movement looks entirely scattershot. Millions of isolated users logging on, clicking away, abandoning carts, and making spontaneous purchases with no obvious pattern. For systems engineers and marketers, this creates an immediate problem. Allocating budget and server bandwidth feels like a gamble when the target audience behaves like a random variable. That chaos is an illusion. Online conversion is the highly deterministic output of a specific, defined architecture. That framework is known as the EC Consumer Behavior Model. This model separates the entire digital purchasing environment into two distinct halves: the rigid variables we have no power over, and the specific inputs we can actively engineer. We are going to deconstruct this architecture layer by layer to see exactly how these competing factors force a user to make a purchasing decision. Understanding this multivariable system provides a roadmap for transitioning a platform from relying on statistical luck toward a strategy of engineered, repeatable revenue. At the center is the buyer's decision process, a sequence moving from attitude to intention and to purchase. Attitude is the baseline state. Intention is the focused desire. The purchase node is a gateway to a continuous feedback loop, loyalty. This loop is the true economic engine of any e-commerce operation. Single isolated transactions cost too much to acquire to sustain a business long-term. However, this engine requires highly specific conditions to turn over. If the surrounding inputs fail, the sequence breaks immediately at the attitude stage, and the user never reaches a purchase. Optimizing a site for a single isolated transaction is a strategic failure. The architecture's true purpose is to route users cleanly into this loyalty loop. This chart shows the complete EC consumer behavior model. The entire upper half represents the uncontrollable variables, starting here with consumer characteristics. These are the hard demographic and personal elements: age, gender, education, and lifestyle. These fixed traits determine a user's initial baseline and preferences before they ever see a single product on a website. Moving horizontally, we find the external pressures acting on the user, mapped as environmental characteristics. This encompasses social influences, cultural norms, and community networks. These external forces actively constrain or dictate what a user considers acceptable to purchase. The definitive rule for both consumer and environmental characteristics is that the merchant has absolutely zero power to alter them. Because these top-tier inputs are rigidly fixed, the entire lower half of the system must be engineered to flawlessly adapt to these pre-existing conditions. Now we look at the variables the system architect actually controls, beginning with product and service characteristics. These are the physical and economic levers: the tangibility, the price point, the build quality, and the level of customization. The second controllable variable is the identity of the seller itself, categorized as merchant and intermediary characteristics. The critical components here are brand reputation, stated policies, and overall trustworthiness. When presented to a user, these trigger an information search phase. First is product brokering, deciding exactly what item to buy based strictly on features and price. The second path is merchant brokering. Merchant brokering is the process of deciding from whom to buy that specific item, evaluating the seller's reliability alongside the product. Possessing superior product characteristics is mathematically useless if the platform's identity fails to win the merchant brokering phase of the user's search. This diagram illustrates the most critical, highly engineerable component of the entire architecture, the EC systems layer. This layer acts as the physical bridge that actively routes a user's intent into an executed purchase. We break this into three pillars. First, payment and logistics supports, governing delivery, security, and privacy. Second, website features. This covers information accuracy, presentation clarity, and navigational usability. Finally, customer service, encompassing FAQs, status tracking, and direct communication. The design of these three pillars dictates digital friction. When any of these systems are poorly designed, they create immediate mechanical bottlenecks. That friction instantly degrades the user's initial attitude and aborts the purchase intention before the transaction completes. The EC systems layer functions as a system-wide multiplier. It either perfectly scales up strong product features or it multiplies them by zero. A merchant can hold the perfect product for the exact right demographic, But the interface layer is the ultimate gatekeeper. It is the single most controllable variable with the highest direct impact on immediate conversion. Returning to the full chart, we can locate the final, most valuable output of this entire structure, the loyalty node. In the digital vacuum, there is no physical storefront or handshake to reassure a buyer. Because of that, loyalty cannot exist without engineered trust. Trust is not an organic byproduct. It is a calculated output directly manufactured by the EC systems layer. Specific architectural choices, like flawless logistics routing and highly transparent status tracking, prove the merchant's reliability and solidify trust post-purchase. But merchants must also replace the physical community trust that users naturally rely on with robust digital equivalents. This is achieved through reputation-based systems, platforms where parties with no prior knowledge of each other use aggregate peer feedback to assess trustworthiness. These reputation metrics artificially recreate the informational social influence we saw in the uncontrollable environmental variables, but bring it directly under the platform's control. Reliable conversion emerges from a structured alignment of these known variables. By meticulously mapping uncontrollable demographic factors to highly controllable digital infrastructure, system engineers can predictably route chaotic user intent straight through to recurring loyalty.